In this week's readings, I learned a lot about the ethics of technology and how they are exponentially advancing and just becoming more merged with humanity. In the first chapter of Technology versus Humanity, the author kind of introduces his argument about how humanity needs to be careful about the effects of technology and how quickly it's growing and advancing. Because it's just driving exponential change in like every aspect of our lives. And like throughout the first and second chapter, he just kind of talks about how like humans and machines are kind of starting to merge, which becomes very dangerous. But he made the claim that humanity will change more in the next 20 years than in the previous 300 years. He was saying how like humans, we think that the future is going to be like the past, but because of how like quickly technology is advancing, that's just not going to be the case, but that we are at a huge pivot point of a 90-10. So like there's a 90% chance that technology could be good and a 10% chance that it could be bad. But on the other hand, there's also the chance that if we keep going at the rate that we are, that there's a 90% chance of things being bad and us being in this dystopian world versus a 10% chance of things being good. So it's important for humans to just kind of understand that and to be careful about what we're doing and to just like understand the like consequences and effects of continuing to advance technology. And that we also just like need to define what it even means to be human, because that's something that philosophers have struggled with for years to define, but that is going to be the like crucial and like critical point of us not letting machines become like humans. And so he discussed how humans have like ethics and feelings and things like that. And that's something that we can't necessarily teach to machines and that we shouldn't, because that's what society is centered and grounded on. And so he talks about that throughout both chapters. And he just talks about how like, yeah, essentially that society like runs on norms and contracts and values and morals, and that's just not something, I mean, down the line we might be able to teach machines that, but we shouldn't. It gives them honestly too much power. And he talks about in the second chapter how cognitive engineering could eventually like improve the IQ of humans by like 100 times, which could also be dangerous because should humans even have that much power, because we're trying to be like something we can't be. And so, yeah, so he just talks about the definition of like what it means to be human and like whether like how much technology should infiltrate that. And so he also posed a set of questions that we can ask ourselves about like the ethics of like technology. Like the first question he asked was, does this idea violate the human rights of anyone involved? And so that's just kind of a question to ask with technology and if we continue to advance it. And so, like I said, he did mention that advancing technology, there's a lot of pros to it, and there's a lot of like opportunities where it could be good and like potential for humanity. But we also need to think like holistically about the whole situation and about society, and just making sure that technology is just promoting human flourishing and not replacing us. In the article Technological Determinism, it talks about like what technological determinism is, which is a reductionist theory that aims to provide a causative link between technology and a society's nature. So essentially, Thorsten Veblen, who coined the term, he just said that technology in any given society defines its nature. So it's like the driving force, that basically changes in technology are like the most important source that leads to change in society, which we've seen throughout the years, like with the introduction of like steam engines or like coal and like just all sort like the Industrial Revolution, all those types of things. But it also influences the level of knowledge in a society. So they gave the example that with the introduction of newer agricultural tools and methods, that there's been less knowledge of traditional means of farming. So we do just have to understand that technology is a driving force and that it changes society, and it also changes our knowledge within society. And according to Langdon Winner, he said that technology is not the slave of the human being, but rather humans are slaves to technology as they are forced to adapt to the technological environment that surrounds them. And that's kind of known as like autonomous technological determinism. And it's essentially saying that machines are in control of humans, humans are not in control of machines, which kind of ties back into the Technology versus Humanity book, where he's talking about that we need to stop that merging and need to make sure that they're separate and that humans are humans, machines are machines. We as humans give the machines value, and we need to make sure that we are continuing to do that instead of letting the machines have control over our society. And then the final article, which was on hostile design, theoretical and empirical prospects, it talks about what hostile design is, which is basically objects within public spaces that have the effect of targeting vulnerable groups and have garnered like criticism for the hostility. So like an example would be spikes on a ledge or like another surface that kind of keep people from resting there. A lot of hostile design is targeted at the homeless population, things like shortened benches or benches with armrests. And so it causes a lot of issues. And like you kind of have to consider several things when you're thinking about hostile design. So the first one is hostile is a value judgment. It's not a strict definition. The second one is you have to consider it in the political and social climate of where you're talking about. It can't just be talked about in that design piece. The third is that thinking about visibility. So part of hostile design is that it gets those unwanted groups out, which then makes it hard for the untargeted groups to see that as like a hostile design. And then the fourth is that you should be able to account for the possibility of resistance like from those populations. And then the last is that there's a lot of variability in class of things that can be called hostile designs. And so like some things might be hostile to somebody, but not to another. And that's the whole targeted versus untargeted groups. And so they just talked about needing a lot of research as we continue with this and just like the ethics behind all of it. So essentially like all of these readings kind of related together because they focused a lot on the ethics and morals of technology and design and things like that. Both chapters of Technology versus Humanity kind of built on each other since it is the same author, and they tackled further into arguments that were made by the author, just about like how technology is growing and the ethics of it and how we as humans like should kind of prevent the merging of humanity and technology. And then the article about technological determinism kind of touched on the power of humans versus technology, which was similar to the articles from Module 1, Questions Concerning Technology, and then the philosophy of the technology of the gun. And so all of that kind of relates and continues to kind of build this course. And then personally, I have actually had like conversations with people and teachers in different classes about the effects of technology on our society and how humans and machines are rapidly emerging. So it's really interesting reading these articles and chapters of the book and just kind of understanding it in like another context. I also agree with the articles and like the author that there are many positive directions that we're headed with technology, like advanced medicine and procedures. It's saving a lot of lives, but we also need to be careful about how much power we're giving to technology, like how they talked about the human genome editing. That's something that just like should not, in my opinion, be done. That's just like morally not right. But that is like another kind of topic of discussion that people can have. And then the last way that it kind of connects to me is I have actually seen a lot of examples of hostile designs in traveling to different cities and things like that. Obviously, at the time, I really didn't know that because I was an untargeted group. But now that I kind of understand that and have read this article and see it more, I'm definitely going to be a lot more aware of like examples of hostile design and kind of the like political environment of the area, I guess. But yeah, I thought that this module's readings were really interesting and really applicable to our society in just a bunch of different ways, in the way that technology is just continuing to grow and advance and how we as humans can prevent it from merging with humanity and just kind of lessen the power of it.